Imagine waking up each day with the certainty that nothing or no one can steal your peace. Imagine a life where every criticism, every offense, every inconvenience is nothing more than a small pebble on the road. Something you can easily step over without a second thought. It sounds almost impossible, doesn't it? Like something reserved for the wisest sages, far removed from the chaos of the modern world. But what if I told you this is not just a lofty dream, but a principle that has been practiced for centuries? The Stoics, ancient philosophers who lived and breathed the essence of resilience, believed in something far more powerful than the fleeting highs of life. They understood that true strength comes not from the ability to control everything around us, but from mastering the one thing we can control, our response to the world. Think about it. Every day, we face challenges that could throw us off balance. A harsh word from a colleague, an unexpected setback, or an argument with a loved one. The natural instinct is to react, to fight back, to defend our ego. But the Stoics took a different path. They didn't just passively accept the challenges, they chose to remain unshaken, calm in the face of adversity. Why? Because they recognized that peace is not found in the absence of problems, but in how we handle them. They weren't emotionless, robotic figures who walked through life unaffected. No, they felt anger, frustration, sadness, and all the other human emotions we experience. What made them different, however, was their ability to acknowledge these emotions without letting them control their actions. They saw emotions as fleeting clouds in the sky, not as storms that should dictate the course of their lives. By learning to pause before reacting, to take a deep breath and reflect, they discovered the power of inner peace that was unbreakable, even in the most turbulent of times. This is not to say that life was always easy for them. The Stoics faced hardship, loss, and pain just like everyone else, but they believed that how we respond to life's challenges is what truly defines us. They taught us that we don't have to be slaves to our emotions. Instead, we can learn to govern them, to transform them into something that empowers us rather than controls us. Now, let me ask you, how often do you let the little things in life rob you of your peace? How often do you find yourself reacting impulsively, letting frustration or anger dictate your actions? The truth is, we all do it, but the Stoic path offers us a better way. It offers a life where peace is not just a fleeting moment, but a constant, unshakable presence, a life where we are the masters of our emotions, and not the other way around. Imagine how liberating that would feel. This is the essence of Stoicism, to live a life where peace is within reach. No matter the chaos around us, it's not about avoiding challenges or pretending that life is always perfect. It's about realizing that we have the power to choose how we respond, and that, my friends, is where true freedom lies. Anger, like a relentless wildfire, has the power to consume everything in its path. It begins as a small spark, ignited by something as simple as a rude comment or a minor setback. But once it catches hold, it spreads quickly. Every frustration, every unmet expectation, stokes the flames. feeding the fire until it becomes all-consuming. What most people fail to realize is that anger doesn't just harm the situation, it harms us deeply. Research from Harvard has shown that each time we allow ourselves to slip into anger, our bodies respond in ways that are physically damaging. A chemical storm takes over, causing our blood pressure to rise and cortisol, the stress hormone, to flood our system. This isn't a reaction to a real threat, mind you, but to something as trivial as a misunderstood word or a delayed plan. And while our bodies are fighting these chemical battles, our minds are clouded, making it nearly impossible to think clearly. Anger doesn't protect us, it imprisons us in a cycle of emotional turmoil, draining our energy and clouding our judgment. But the effects aren't just immediate. Over time, anger begins to wear away at both our physical and mental health. Chronic anger, if left unchecked, can actually shrink the hippocampus, the part of our brain responsible for memory and emotional regulation. Imagine that. The very thing that helps us remember and understand our emotions becomes compromised by the anger we hold on to. Rational decision-making becomes clouded, and before we know it, we are reacting impulsively, saying things we don't mean and making decisions that we'll regret. It's a destructive cycle that we often fail to break, thinking that we are justified in holding onto our anger. What's worse is that anger doesn't just hurt us, it hurts the people around us. It erodes relationships, breaks trust, and creates an emotional distance that can be difficult to repair. Think about a time when you've been angry with someone close to you. The tension in the air, the unspoken words, the unresolved issues, it builds walls between people. Respect begins to wither, and trust takes a backseat to defensiveness. Relationships become fragile, and the longer we hold onto our anger, the harder it becomes to rebuild what was lost. But here's the important thing. Anger, in itself, is not inherently bad. It's a messenger, a signal that something inside us needs attention. We may feel angry because our boundaries were crossed, because we feel misunderstood, or because something deep within us is unsettled. It's a natural human response, and it's important to acknowledge it. However, the real question is how we choose to handle it. Do we allow it to consume us and dictate our behavior? Or do we use it as an opportunity for self-reflection and growth? Anger, when channeled correctly, can actually be a catalyst for change. It can serve as a wake-up call, urging us to address underlying issues that have been neglected. But if we cling to it, let it control us, and act from a place of reactivity, we allow it to rob us of our peace, our health, and our relationships. The key is not to eliminate anger entirely, but to learn how to process it in a healthy, constructive way. When we do this, we reclaim our power, regain our mental clarity, and begin to heal, not just ourselves, but the relationships that are so crucial to our well-being. In the end, anger is not the problem, it's our relationship with it. It's about how we manage that internal fire, how we choose to respond, and how we can transform that energy into something more positive. When we master this, we unlock a new level of emotional freedom, and our lives begin to change in ways we never thought possible. The Stoic approach to anger is not about denying it or pretending it doesn't exist, but rather about understanding its source and mastering how we respond to it. Stoicism teaches that anger is a natural emotion, but it's not the emotion itself that causes harm, it's the way we react to it. The wisdom of the Stoics lies in their ability to change their interpretation of the events that trigger their anger. As Epictetus wisely stated, it's not the things that disturb us, but our interpretation of them. When we change how we perceive a situation, we take away its power to provoke us. Think about it. How often do we find ourselves enraged by a situation, only to later realize it wasn't as dire as we initially thought? The person who cut us off in traffic, the harsh comment from a colleague, or the way someone interrupted us mid-sentence, it all feels like a threat in the moment. But it's our interpretation that makes it a threat. The Stoics recognized this and saw it as a vital truth. Our reactions are within our control. They taught us that we can extinguish the spark of anger before it becomes a raging fire. This doesn't mean we suppress our feelings or bottle up our emotions. It means we learn to process them in a way that doesn't compromise our peace. When anger arises, instead of acting on impulse, we take a moment to pause and ask ourselves, what is truly at stake here? Is this frustration worth losing my peace over? Am I seeing the situation clearly, or is my perception clouded by emotion? When we practice this kind of mindfulness, we create space between the stimulus, the thing that triggers anger, and our response. This space allows us to evaluate the situation without letting our emotions control us. It's like a pause button for the mind, giving us the chance to respond thoughtfully rather than react impulsively. And this is where true power lies, because it's not the external world that controls us, but the way we choose to perceive and react to it. Stoicism teaches that managing anger is not just about preserving our internal peace, but also protecting our relationships. Think about how many times anger has created distance between you and someone you care about. When we react from a place of anger, we often say things we don't mean, hurt people unintentionally, and create emotional walls that are hard to tear down. By practicing Stoic principles, we stop anger from ruling our behavior, allowing us to maintain healthier, more harmonious relationships. And let's not forget the most important aspect of all, our freedom. When we allow anger to control us, we are no longer free. We are prisoners to our emotions, trapped in a cycle of reaction. But when we learn to master our anger, we regain our freedom. We free ourselves from the emotional roller coaster that drags us through highs and lows. And we find a steady, unshakable peace. The Stoics didn't just teach us to control our anger, they taught us to transform it. They showed us that anger can be a powerful tool for self-awareness and growth if we choose to understand it and use it wisely. By applying Stoic principles, we can face the inevitable challenges of life with composure, strength, and an unwavering sense of peace, ultimately reclaiming our emotional freedom. How often do we find ourselves tangled in the effort to control the uncontrollable? How much energy do we pour into worrying about what other people think? What might happen in the future? Or how others will respond to us? The truth is, most of us spend a significant portion of our lives trying to manage things that are entirely out of our hands. It could be something as simple as trying to shape the reactions of those around us. Or it could be an overwhelming anxiety about the future, which is full of uncertainty. But in this futile pursuit, we lose sight of what truly matters, the things we actually have control over. The Stoics understood this fundamental truth centuries ago. They recognized that there are only a few things in life that are truly within our control: our judgments, our actions, and our decisions. Everything else, our bodies, our reputation, the actions of others, and even the events that unfold in the world, are beyond our influence. Once we grasp this, we are free. The real power lies not in trying to control everything around us, but in learning to release the illusion that we ever could. Think about it. How many times have you found yourself stressing over how someone will perceive you or what might happen tomorrow? The energy spent in these worries drains us, causing unnecessary anxiety and emotional turmoil. It pulls us out of the present moment, preventing us from fully experiencing life as it is. In truth, we cannot control how others perceive us, just as we cannot predict the future with certainty. When we invest so much in trying to control these uncontrollable aspects of life, we deny ourselves peace. The liberation comes when we let go of this need for control. Imagine how much lighter you would feel if you stopped worrying about what others think of you or obsessing over what might or might not happen. Accepting that some things are simply out of our hands allows us to conserve energy for the things that truly matter: our responses, our actions, and our ability to make choices in the present. The more we focus on what we can control, the less drained we become by the chaos of life. The Stoic practice of focusing only on what we can control is not about passivity or giving up. It's about gaining clarity and perspective. When we stop fighting to control the uncontrollable, we free ourselves from the mental clutter that leads to stress and burnout. We create space for peace of mind and emotional stability. This shift doesn't just bring us calm, it also improves our ability to make sound decisions, to act with intention, and to navigate the challenges of life with grace. It's not easy, of course. Letting go of control requires constant self-awareness and the willingness to relinquish the need to manipulate every outcome. But the rewards are immeasurable. When we embrace the reality that some things are beyond our reach, we open ourselves up to a life that is more present, more fulfilling, and less burdened by unnecessary stress. Ultimately, it's the act of letting go that allows us to truly experience freedom. The freedom to live our lives on our terms, without being overwhelmed by the weight of things we can never change. The root of most anger lies not in the events themselves, but in the expectations we place upon them. We all have a mental picture of how things should unfold, how our relationships should go, how others should behave, how situations should resolve. But when reality doesn't meet our idealized version of events, we feel the sting of disappointment. It's in this gap between expectation and reality that anger takes root. the more rigid our expectations, the more likely we are to experience frustration when things inevitably fall short of what we envisioned. Think about it. How many times have you felt angry at someone for not meeting your expectations? Maybe it was a friend who didn't come through when you needed them, or a colleague who didn't meet a deadline. Perhaps it was a partner who didn't behave in the way you hoped they would. But here's the key question. Were you angry because of what they actually did? Or were you angry because of what you thought they should have done? Often, our anger is not about the behavior itself, but the story we've told ourselves about how things should have gone. This is where the emotional pain begins, when our expectations clash with the reality we face. The higher our expectations, the more intense our disappointment when things don't align with them. It's easy to fall into the trap of thinking that the world owes us something, or that people should behave in ways that fit our idealized narratives. But the truth is, life is unpredictable, people are flawed, situations change, and things often don't go as planned. The more we cling to rigid expectations, the more we set ourselves up for disappointment, and the more room we give for anger to take hold. This is where the Stoic philosophy offers us valuable guidance. The Stoics didn't teach us to suppress our emotions or pretend they don't exist. Instead, they encouraged us to adjust our expectations, rather than demanding that things should happen in a certain way. We can shift our mindset to something more flexible. I would prefer this, but I can accept this instead. By softening our expectations and embracing the unpredictability of life, we free ourselves from the emotional turmoil that comes with unmet demands. When we shift our perspective, we start to see the world with more compassion and understanding. We begin to realize that other people aren't here to meet our every need or expectation. Life doesn't exist to serve our personal narrative. This doesn't mean we stop striving for our goals or stop hoping for the best. It simply means that we let go of the need to control every outcome and embrace the reality that things won't always go as planned, and that's okay. Adjusting our expectations doesn't mean we settle for mediocrity or lower our standards. It means we become more realistic about what we can control and what we can't. We begin to focus on the things that are within our power, our own actions, reactions, and attitudes. When we stop expecting the world to bend to our will, we can begin to act with more patience, resilience, and grace. Personally, I've found that the more I release unrealistic expectations, the more peace I feel. It's liberating to accept that not everything needs to go according to my plan for me to be content. It's not about lowering standards, but about learning to flow with life's natural rhythms, rather than fighting against them. When we stop holding others and the world to impossible standards, we create space for peace and for more authentic connections with the people around us. So, next time you feel that rush of anger arising, take a moment to ask yourself, what did I expect to happen here? And, more importantly, is this expectation reasonable? By adjusting our expectations, we can avoid much of the emotional turmoil that arises from unrealistic demands. This simple shift in mindset can not only help us manage anger but also lead to a greater sense of peace and satisfaction in our lives. Every moment of anger is a choice. It's easy to believe that when anger arises, we have no control over it. We feel provoked, something triggers us, and the next thing we know, we're lashing out, our emotions taking the wheel. But this belief is a lie. In fact, there is a space, albeit often brief, between the stimulus that triggers our anger and the response we choose to make. This space is where our freedom resides. It's within this pause that we have the power to decide how we react, to choose whether to let our emotions drive us or to respond with intention. The Stoics understood this deeply. They didn't teach that we should suppress or deny our emotions, but rather that we should learn to govern them. They practiced the art of pausing before reacting. By creating this small but powerful space between stimulus and response, they allowed themselves time to reflect. The pause gives us the ability to ask ourselves, is this reaction going to help me? Or will it make things worse? When we choose to pause, we take back control of our emotions instead of letting them dictate our actions. Think about the last time you got angry. Maybe it was a minor frustration, like being cut off in traffic, or something more significant, like a disagreement with a friend. How did you react in that moment? Did you immediately voice your frustration? Or did you pause, take a deep breath, and choose a more measured response? If you're like most people, the first instinct is to react. Our minds are wired to protect us, and when we feel threatened or wronged, we go into fight or flight mode. But in that instant, if we could just pause, we would realize that we don't have to engage in the emotional storm. We can choose to step back, take a breath, and regain clarity. This pause doesn't have to be long. Just a few seconds can make a world of difference. It's in this brief moment that we create the opportunity to decide how we want to respond, not how our emotions want us to react. We may still feel anger, but we can choose to channel it constructively. Instead of unleashing it on someone else, we can express our feelings calmly or decide that it's not worth reacting at all. The power of this pause is transformative. Instead of being driven by automatic responses, we can act with purpose and intention, guided by our values rather than our impulses. I've found that when I take this pause, when I choose to breathe and reflect before reacting, it's like switching gears. It's a game changer. In the past, I'd allow anger to control me, letting it dictate how I interacted with others. But by taking that brief moment to stop, breathe, and reflect, I've been able to shift from reacting out of emotion to responding with mindfulness. It's not always easy. It's a practice that requires discipline and awareness. But the results are undeniable. I find myself less stressed, less regretful, and more at peace with my interactions. Here's a simple exercise that can help incorporate this practice into your daily life. Next time you feel anger rise within you, pause, take a deep breath, count to 3, and ask yourself, will my reaction help the situation or escalate it? Use this pause to decide whether your emotional response serves you or harms you. This practice might feel uncomfortable at first, especially when anger is intense, but over time, it becomes second nature. You'll start to notice that you no longer feel as overwhelmed by anger, and instead, you can approach situations with greater control and clarity. In the end, the space between stimulus and response is where we find our freedom. It's where we can choose to be the person we want to be, not just react out of habit or emotion. And this simple pause, this brief moment of reflection, can make all the difference in how we navigate our emotions, relationships, and ultimately, our lives. When we're angry, our words can become weapons. We often speak to attack, to defend ourselves, or to make the other person feel the same frustration we're experiencing. It's almost instinctive, a knee-jerk reaction that feels necessary in the heat of the moment. But this approach does nothing to solve the issue. In fact, it only deepens the divide between us and the other person, creating further misunderstanding and conflict. What if, instead of using our words as weapons, we could use them as tools for connection? This is where the power of nonviolent communication comes in. The Stoic practice of nonviolent communication encourages us to step back from our impulses and speak with empathy and clarity. It's about focusing on expressing our own needs without placing blame or judgment on others. This shift in approach doesn't mean we suppress our feelings or pretend to be calm when we're not. It means we move from a place of reactivity to one of purpose. By learning to communicate our emotions in a way that invites understanding rather than defensiveness, we open the door to real connection and reduce the potential for further anger and misunderstanding. The key method in nonviolent communication is the four-step model: observation, feeling, need, and request. Let's break it down. The first step, observation, is about separating fact from interpretation. Often, when we're angry, we mix the event with our own judgment of it. We say things like, "You never listen to me," when in fact, the person may have simply missed one comment. Instead of making generalizations or blaming, we state what happened in neutral terms. "When I spoke, I felt like I wasn't being heard." This keeps the focus on the event rather than on attacking the other person's character. Next comes the feeling step. This is where we express what's going on inside us, not to shame, but to inform. We don't say, "You made me angry," because it implies the other person has control over our emotions. Instead, we say, "I feel frustrated," or "I feel hurt." By taking ownership of our emotions, we empower ourselves and avoid triggering defensiveness in the other person. The third step is identifying the need behind our feelings. All feelings stem from unmet needs. When we say we're angry, it's often because a need for respect, understanding, or connection hasn't been met. This is the moment where we dig deeper. Instead of focusing on what the other person did wrong, we ask ourselves, "What do I need right now?" It might be, "I need to feel heard," or "I need some space to process." By naming our needs, we create an opportunity for the other person to understand us and consider how they might fulfill those needs. Finally, the request step is where we make a clear, actionable request. Instead of demanding or expecting the other person to change, we ask for something specific that can help resolve the situation. For example, we might say, "I would appreciate it if we could talk about this again after I've had time to think." Or, "Could you please let me finish speaking before responding?" This request is not a command. It's a way to invite collaboration and mutual respect. I've found that when I applied this method in my own life, especially during moments of conflict, the results are transformative. It's easy to fall into the trap of speaking from anger. But when I take a step back and communicate using these 4 steps, it shifts the entire dynamic. I feel more heard, and I'm able to express my feelings without triggering defensiveness or escalating the situation. And more often than not, the other person responds with a greater willingness to understand my perspective. The beauty of nonviolent communication is that it helps us to approach difficult conversations with the goal of connection, not confrontation. When we speak with empathy and clarity, we create a space where both parties can express themselves without fear of judgment or attack. This not only reduces the potential for anger but also deepens our relationships. We move from a place of reactivity to one of intentional communication, where our words become bridges instead of walls. It's a powerful tool for transforming conflict into understanding and for fostering connection. Even in the most difficult of situations, anger, when viewed as a messenger, has the power to unlock profound insights about ourselves. It's easy to see anger as an enemy, something to be suppressed or avoided. But what if we reframed it? Instead of seeing it as a destructive force, what if we began to recognize it as a signal, a clue pointing us towards something deeper? Anger often arises when a need or value is threatened, whether that need is for respect, safety, fairness, or something else that we hold dear. In those moments, anger is not just an emotional eruption. It's a message from our inner selves, asking us to pay attention, to reflect, and to act in a way that aligns with our true values. By shifting our mindset and viewing anger as an opportunity for growth, we transform it from a destructive force into a catalyst for wisdom. The first step in this transformation is to pause and ask ourselves, what is this anger trying to tell me? What need or value feels threatened right now? Often, when we feel angry, we rush to judge the situation or the person who triggered our emotions. But when we stop and dig a little deeper, we start to realize that anger is a sign of something we care about being challenged. Maybe it's a need for respect, or perhaps it's a sense of fairness or integrity that has been violated. Whatever it is, that recognition opens the door to understanding. From this perspective, each time we feel anger, it's an invitation to get to know ourselves better. Anger reveals our boundaries, our values, and what matters most to us. It's like a spotlight, shining on areas of our lives that need attention. If we're willing to listen, anger can lead us to uncover beliefs or expectations we hadn't fully realized were shaping our reactions. For example, the last time I felt really angry, I took a moment to ask myself why. What was it that had triggered me? I realized that the anger was rooted in a feeling of disrespect, a value I hold deeply. Understanding this allowed me to address the issue with more clarity, both with the person involved and within myself. Once we recognize the root of our anger, we can make wiser choices moving forward. Instead of letting anger control us, we can use it to fuel constructive action. For example, if our anger is rooted in a lack of respect, we can choose to communicate our feelings assertively, setting boundaries in a way that honors both ourselves and others. If it's triggered by injustice or unfairness, we can channel that energy into advocating for change in a way that aligns with our values. In these moments, anger is no longer an uncontrollable storm, but a powerful force that drives us toward greater self-awareness and meaningful action. In my own experience, this approach has been transformative. Rather than letting anger consume me or spill out in hurtful ways, I've learned to pause and reflect on what the anger is telling me. It's a practice that takes time and patience, but the results are worth it. I've found that by understanding the underlying causes of my anger, I can make more thoughtful decisions, communicate more effectively, and ultimately feel more at peace with myself. So, the next time you feel anger rising within you, try to view it as a messenger. Ask yourself what need or value is being threatened, and use that insight to grow. Anger, when processed with intention, can lead to wisdom and self-discovery. It can be the spark that ignites positive change, both within ourselves and in the way we interact with the world. Each time we face anger, we are presented with an opportunity to understand ourselves better and make choices that align with our highest values. And in doing so, we not only transform our anger, but we transform ourselves. Radical empathy is a transformative power, one that holds the key to dissolving anger and fostering deeper connections. We often see the actions of others through the lens of our own frustrations, judgments, or hurt. When someone cuts us off in traffic, makes a snide remark, or disregards our feelings, our instinct is to react quickly, emotionally, and often in a way that further escalates the tension. But what if we took a step back? What if, instead of immediately reacting, we practiced empathy, truly trying to understand the other person's perspective? This is where radical empathy can change everything. Radical empathy goes beyond the conventional notion of simply putting ourselves in someone else's shoes. It challenges us to look past our own hurt and consider the complex, often unseen layers of the other person's life. What if, instead of assuming the person who cut us off in traffic is rude and inconsiderate, we considered that they might be rushing to the hospital or dealing with a personal crisis? What if, instead of feeling slighted by someone's sarcastic remark, we took a moment to reflect on the possibility that they might be struggling with their own internal battles? This shift in perspective doesn't excuse harmful behavior or allow others to walk over us, but it opens the door to understanding and compassion. Radical empathy invites us to look beyond the surface and to ask, what's really going on here? What might be motivating this person to act in this way? It's a practice that calls for patience and emotional maturity, but when we adopt it, we begin to see people not as obstacles to our happiness or as adversaries, but as complex individuals with their own stories and struggles. In my own life, I've found that embracing radical empathy has allowed me to respond to challenging situations with a calmness I didn't know was possible. I remember a time when I was in a heated discussion with a colleague. The conversation quickly turned tense, and I felt myself growing angry. But instead of lashing out, I paused and asked myself, what might be going on in their life that's contributing to this? In that moment, I realized my colleague had just returned from a difficult personal situation. I understood that their frustration wasn't necessarily aimed at me, but rather was a reflection of something they were struggling with. That simple shift in perspective didn't just calm my anger. It opened the door to a much more meaningful conversation. When we practice radical empathy, we take a step away from our own emotions and open ourselves to the possibility that there's more to a situation than meets the eye. We stop seeing people as obstacles to our peace and start recognizing them as fellow human beings navigating their own challenges. This shift reduces our immediate emotional reactions, allowing us to respond more thoughtfully and with greater understanding. The beauty of radical empathy is that it's not just a passive practice, it's an active choice. We choose to look beyond the surface and ask ourselves what's happening beneath it. We choose to respond not from a place of hurt or anger, but from a place of understanding and compassion. And this choice transforms not just how we see others, but how we experience the world. Instead of reacting with anger, we react with curiosity, kindness, and the willingness to understand. In the end, radical empathy doesn't just reduce anger, it has the potential to heal relationships, bridge divides, and create a more compassionate world. It challenges us to move beyond our initial judgments and to truly see others for who they are, not for how their actions make us feel. When we practice radical empathy, we break the cycle of anger and open the door to deeper understanding and connection. Emotional intelligence is like an invisible shield, one that quietly protects us from the often overwhelming forces of conflict. In moments of tension, whether at work, in relationships, or with strangers, the raw emotions that bubble up can quickly lead to confrontations if not managed properly. But what if we could transform these moments of discomfort into opportunities for growth? What if, instead of reacting impulsively to a situation, we could respond with awareness and intentionality, turning potential conflicts into productive conversations? This is the power of emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence, at its core, is the ability to recognize, understand, and manage our own emotions, while also being attuned to the emotions of others. The first step in utilizing this powerful tool in conflict is to recognize the early signs of discomfort, those subtle cues that tell us when we are about to be triggered. For example, when I feel a surge of frustration in a conversation, I've learned to recognize the physical signs. My shoulders tense, my heart rate picks up, and my thoughts race. These are my body's signals that I'm moving into a heightened emotional state. Recognizing these cues early allows me to take a pause, assess the situation, and decide how to proceed rather than allowing my emotions to take control. The next step in emotional intelligence is regulating our emotional responses. This is where true growth happens. It's easy to let anger, frustration, or fear dictate our reactions. But when we allow ourselves to pause and breathe, we create space for a more thoughtful response. This doesn't mean suppressing our emotions or pretending we aren't upset. It means acknowledging the emotion and choosing how we want to express it. For instance, if someone says something that upsets me, instead of snapping back immediately, I've learned to pause and ask myself, what am I really feeling here? What do I need right now? This simple practice allows me to respond calmly, even in situations that would have once set me off. But emotional intelligence doesn't stop with regulating our own emotions. It's also about understanding the emotions of others. When we are in conflict, it's easy to focus only on our own perspective, our own frustration, our own hurt, but emotional intelligence teaches us to expand our view, to step into the other person's shoes, and to ask, what might they be feeling? Understanding the emotions of others allows us to respond with empathy, which in turn opens the door to better communication and resolution. When I take the time to recognize that someone else may be anxious, overwhelmed, or misunderstood, I can approach the conversation with greater compassion and patience, rather than defensiveness. In my personal experience, cultivating emotional intelligence has transformed the way I handle conflict. There was a time when every disagreement felt like a battle, where my emotions ruled the moment, and I often said things I regretted. But as I've practiced recognizing my emotional triggers, pausing before reacting, and understanding the emotions of others, I've found that conflicts no longer have to escalate. Instead of being a point of contention, they have become opportunities for deeper understanding and connection. I've learned that the more I practice emotional intelligence, the more control I have over my responses, and the more peaceful and productive my relationships become. Emotional intelligence is not just a nice-to-have skill. It's essential for navigating the complexities of human interaction. When we train ourselves to recognize our emotional triggers, regulate our responses, and empathize with others, we are no longer victims of conflict but active participants in transforming it. It's like having a superpower that not only shields us from the worst of human interactions but also empowers us to turn potential clashes into moments of growth and connection. And the more we practice this, the more natural it becomes, creating an environment where even the most difficult conversations can lead to resolution and understanding. Gratitude and anger cannot coexist. It's a simple yet profound truth that has transformed the way I approach conflict and frustration. When we feel anger rising, it often takes over, clouding our judgment and narrowing our focus to the very thing that is making us upset. But gratitude has a unique power. It shifts our focus away from what's wrong and places our attention on what is good, what is working, and what we can appreciate in that moment. The act of gratitude doesn't just make us feel better in the short term, it fundamentally rewires our brain, creating pathways that calm our emotional center and promote long-term emotional stability. The science behind this is fascinating. When we practice gratitude, we activate neural pathways that engage the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for higher-order thinking and emotional regulation. At the same time, we calm the amygdala, which is the part of the brain that processes emotions like anger, fear, and frustration. This dynamic shift allows us to manage our emotions in a healthier way, reducing the grip that anger has over us. The more we practice gratitude, the more we reinforce this calming effect, creating a mental environment where anger simply cannot thrive. This isn't just a theoretical concept for me. It's been a transformative tool in my own life. I remember a time when I would get easily frustrated during stressful moments. Whether it was a delay in my day, a miscommunication, or an unkind remark from someone, anger would swell up inside of me, and before I knew it, I would be caught in a cycle of irritation that would only make the situation worse. But I realized that the more I focused on my anger, the more it consumed me. That's when I decided to try something different. I turned to gratitude. Instead of letting frustration build up, I began to shift my attention to the things I could appreciate, even in those moments of irritation. At first, it wasn't easy. My instinct was to focus on what had gone wrong, on how unfair or irritating the situation was. But I started small, keeping a gratitude journal and making it a habit to write down at least 3 things I was thankful for every day. On days when frustration or anger began to creep in, I made it a point to pause and reflect on something positive. Whether it was the kindness of a stranger, the beauty of nature around me, or the love of my family, focusing on these things gave me a moment of mental clarity. In those moments, I could feel the anger melting away, replaced by a sense of peace and appreciation. The results were incredible. Over time, the more I practiced gratitude, the less often I found myself reacting with anger. I started to see situations differently. Instead of seeing obstacles or irritations, I began to recognize opportunities for growth, for learning, and for gratitude. I realized that the things I had once felt were inconveniences were actually chances to practice patience, to appreciate the little things, and to connect more deeply with those around me. Keeping a gratitude journal has become an essential part of my daily routine. It's not just a way to reflect on the positive things in my life. It's a tool to actively combat anger and frustration. Whenever I feel myself getting upset, I pause and think about something I'm grateful for in that moment. And I find that it immediately shifts my perspective. What seemed like a huge issue or an annoyance becomes something I can handle with grace. Gratitude has the power to dissolve anger, creating space for peace and emotional resilience. If you've never tried this, I encourage you to start a gratitude practice today. Take a moment each day to write down the things, big or small, that you are thankful for. When you feel frustration or anger arising, instead of letting it take over, turn your focus to gratitude. It might feel awkward at first, but over time, you'll notice a shift in how you handle challenging emotions. Gratitude doesn't just help us feel better, it helps us become better versions of ourselves. Emotionally strong and capable of facing life's challenges with a sense of peace and perspective. Setting healthy boundaries is one of the most crucial skills we can develop to protect our emotional well-being. Without clear boundaries, we often find ourselves overwhelmed, frustrated, and eventually resentful. The problem is that many of us are taught, directly or indirectly, to put others' needs above our own. We fear confrontation or disappointing people, so we stretch ourselves too thin, saying yes when we should say no. And over time, this pattern of ignoring our own limits leads to anger, burnout, and a deep sense of dissatisfaction. But what if we could change this? What if we could create a space where our emotional energy is respected, where we honor our own needs, and where we protect our peace? The first step in setting healthy boundaries is recognizing that boundaries are not walls. Too often, people equate boundaries with shutting others out or building emotional fortresses. But that's not the case. Boundaries are not about cutting people off. They are about creating a space where our needs, our energy, and our well-being are valued. A healthy boundary is like a line drawn in the sand that says, "This is where I end and you begin." But it's done with respect, kindness, and understanding. It's about protecting your emotional resources, so you don't give away more than you can handle. In my own experience, I struggled with saying no for years. I didn't want to disappoint anyone or be seen as selfish. I thought that if I said no, it would make me a bad person or that I would lose relationships. But the truth is, every time I said yes when I meant no, I was slowly chipping away at my peace. I started to resent the people I was constantly saying yes to. Not because they were bad people, but because I hadn't set the boundary to protect my own needs. It wasn't their fault, it was mine, and that resentment built up over time, turning into anger and frustration that only hurt me. When I finally started setting boundaries, it was like a weight had been lifted. I began by practicing saying no in small, non-confrontational situations. At first, it felt uncomfortable, but over time, I realized how powerful it was to take control of my own time and energy. Saying no allowed me to protect my peace. It gave me the space I needed to rest, recharge, and focus on what truly mattered to me. But even more importantly, setting boundaries allowed me to show up as a better version of myself for the people I cared about. When I was able to protect my own energy, I had more to give, and I was able to be more present and engaged in my relationships. Setting healthy boundaries also requires that we communicate them clearly and assertively. This doesn't mean being aggressive or rude. It means being honest and direct about what we need. When we communicate our boundaries effectively, we teach others how to respect them, and we teach ourselves that our needs matter. For example, I've learned to set boundaries around my time. I no longer feel guilty about taking time for myself, and I'm upfront with others about what I can and cannot commit to. When I explain my boundaries calmly and respectfully, most people understand, and the relationships actually become stronger because of it. But setting boundaries isn't always easy. It requires practice, self-awareness, and sometimes a bit of discomfort. The fear of disappointing others or facing conflict can make it challenging. but the long-term benefits are worth it. By setting healthy boundaries, we protect our emotional health, prevent resentment from building, and create the space necessary to live a more balanced, peaceful life. It's not about being selfish, it's about protecting our dignity, our energy, and our peace of mind. And when we do this, we not only take care of ourselves, but we also become better equipped to take care of others. Boundaries allow us to show up fully for the people we love without sacrificing our own well-being in the process. Our emotional energy is finite, yet we often allow it to be drained by things that don't deserve our attention. In a world that's constantly demanding more from us, whether it's through work, relationships, or the endless stream of information, we can easily find ourselves overwhelmed and emotionally exhausted. But what if we could learn to choose where to direct our emotional energy, rather than letting it scatter across every small irritation or stressful situation? The key to maintaining peace lies in understanding that not everything deserves your emotional investment. For years, I fell into the trap of giving my energy to every little thing, arguments that didn't matter, social media posts that triggered unnecessary stress, or situations that I had no control over. Each time I reacted emotionally to something that didn't truly impact my life, I was depleting myself. I remember times when I would get into a heated debate with a stranger online or become fixated on something that upset me. Even though it had no real consequence, my emotional state would fluctuate wildly, and I found myself mentally drained. It took me a while to realize that, in these moments, I wasn't actually solving anything. I was just feeding into a cycle of emotional depletion. The first step in changing this pattern is recognizing what truly deserves our emotional attention. Not everything that happens is worthy of a strong emotional reaction. For instance, the careless comment from a colleague or the minor inconvenience of a delay might seem like something to get upset about in the moment, but they aren't worth the energy we expend on them. The trick is to practice emotional discernment. This means consciously deciding what deserves our focus and what can be let go. I've learned to pause before reacting, to ask myself, is this worth my emotional energy? Will this matter tomorrow, or even next week? When I started practicing emotional discernment, I noticed a shift. I became more selective with my reactions. Instead of jumping into every conflict or feeling overwhelmed by every small setback, I allowed myself to step back and evaluate whether the situation was truly worth my energy. I realized that many things I had previously reacted to with frustration or anger were trivial, and by letting them go, I was preserving my peace. But it's not just about avoiding negative reactions, it's also about choosing to invest in what truly matters. When we conserve our emotional energy, we have more to give to the people and situations that truly deserve it. I began to focus more on the relationships that nourished me and the projects that aligned with my values. Instead of spreading myself thin across every obligation or disappointment, I focused on what truly brought me fulfillment, and this shift allowed me to feel more grounded and purposeful. This practice of emotional discernment doesn't mean we become indifferent or detached from the world around us. It means we approach life with intention, choosing where to invest our energy thoughtfully. It's about recognizing that we cannot control everything, but we can control where we direct our focus and emotional investment. In doing so, we maintain a sense of inner peace, not because life becomes perfect, but because we've learned to filter out the noise and give our attention to what truly matters. By practicing this discernment, we free ourselves from unnecessary emotional turmoil. We stop letting the small things rule our day, and instead, we cultivate a life where our energy is reserved for the people, experiences, and values that enrich us. In the end, not everything deserves our attention, but what we choose to focus on can define the quality of our emotional and mental state. Stoicism teaches us one of the most powerful truths of all. We cannot control the external world, but we can control how we respond to it. Life is filled with challenges, injustices, and moments of frustration. Things will inevitably go wrong. People will disappoint us. Plans will fall through, and sometimes, life will feel completely out of our control. But here's the thing. It's not these events that determine the quality of our lives. It's how we choose to respond to them that shapes our reality. Anger, frustration, and helplessness are all natural human responses. But Stoicism shows us that we don't have to let these emotions rule us. Managing our anger is key to cultivating peace. When we feel anger rising, we have a choice. We can let it consume us and react impulsively. Or we can take a moment to pause, reflect, and respond with wisdom. By learning to pause before reacting, we create space for thoughtful action rather than emotional explosion. We don't suppress our feelings, but we choose to channel them in a way that serves our emotional well-being rather than letting them damage our relationships or cloud our judgment. One of the most important aspects of Stoic philosophy is letting go of unrealistic expectations. We often set ourselves up for anger and disappointment by expecting things to go exactly as we want them to. When reality doesn't align with our expectations, we feel let down and upset. But Stoicism teaches us that this is where we lose our power, by demanding that the world be a certain way. Instead, if we shift our mindset to one of acceptance, acknowledging that things will not always go according to plan, we free ourselves from frustration. We stop holding onto the belief that we can control everything, and in doing so, we regain our peace. Empathy is another cornerstone of Stoic thought. Rather than reacting in anger when someone hurts us or disappoints us, Stoicism teaches us to look beyond the behavior and try to understand the underlying reasons. People are often acting from their own struggles, fears, and insecurities, and when we practice empathy, we soften our judgments and open ourselves to compassion. This doesn't mean tolerating bad behavior, but it allows us to respond with understanding rather than reacting from a place of defensiveness and bitterness. Finally, embracing gratitude is a game changer. It's easy to focus on what's wrong in our lives, the things that irritate us, the obstacles in our way, the ways we've been wronged. But when we focus on what we're grateful for, we shift our perspective. Gratitude has a way of opening our hearts and minds, helping us see the good in every situation, even in the midst of difficulty. When we practice gratitude regularly, we train ourselves to find peace in the present moment, regardless of external circumstances. The more I've practiced these Stoic principles, the more I've noticed a shift in how I handle life's challenges. I no longer react impulsively to frustration, and I've become better at responding with wisdom and emotional strength. My relationships have improved, my stress has lessened, and I feel more at peace with myself. It's not always easy, and it requires consistent effort, but the transformation is real. I encourage you to start practicing these Stoic principles today. Begin by managing your anger. Take a pause before reacting. Let go of unrealistic expectations and embrace the uncertainty of life. Practice empathy by trying to understand others' perspectives, and commit to gratitude, even in challenging times. Over time, these practices will help you become more resilient, more balanced, and more peaceful. The external world will continue to be unpredictable, but you have the power to control how you respond to it. Choose wisely, and watch as you transform your life into one of peace, strength, and purpose.